Counting the
cost of living in Alaska.
wow, Brent. So, how many years have you lived? I mean, did you live in Alaska?
Well, we lived in Alaska for about 10 years.
10 years.
From 1985 to 1995.
Wow, you went to Alaska before I was born.
Oh, yeah, it's a long time ago.
That's amazing. So, who said that your family should go to Alaska? Whose idea was it?
Oh, it was my dad's idea. My
I
mother wasn't crazy about it, but she went where my dad went.
I see.
Mhm.
So your dad moved to Alaska for what?
Well, he was offered. My dad is a diesel mechanic. Was a diesel mechanic, and he was very talented. He had many references of places he had worked, and so he could show anybody his references and get a job pretty much anywhere.
Oh.
And in Alaska, Dad had always been looking for a reason to move to Alaska. But when he got a job up there that paid really well, that paid really good, you know, we moved up there. And for about a year before we moved up there, my parents kept saying, we're going to go live in Alaska.
Wow.
We're going to go live in the bush.
Wow.
And as a youngster, I used to wonder, why are we moving to a bush and how will all of us fit? There are 8 people in my family.
8 people.
Yes.
Wow, that's amazing. So who are the 8 people?
Well, there's my dad and my mom and my 2 older sisters, my older brother, my twin brother, who's 10 minutes older than me. So, and there's my younger brother.
Wow. So, mom and dad and
2 sisters.
2 sisters
and 4 brothers.
4 brothers. Wow, that's a huge family.
Yeah.
So he went to Alaska because he found a good job there that pays him pretty well, right?
That's right. Yes.
Paid him pretty well. So, how was your life different from your life before Alaska?
Well, before we went up to Alaska, you know, we saw our relatives quite frequently, and we usually lived in like the desert of California and Arizona. So going to Alaska for us was a big change as far as the climate goes. And it was a good change as far as how people treated you. Because in a lot of places in Alaska, if you go grocery shopping, strangers you don't know will say to you, well, how are you doing today? And it's kind of surprising because in a lot of places in America that doesn't happen.
So people are very chill and friendly?
Very friendly, you know, and people are just friendly. Well, how are you doing today, sir? And, you know, and so my dad really liked that kind of culture.
Wow, that's amazing. So would you consider entire Alaska as somewhat rural and people are more relaxed and laid back?
I would say so, yes. Yeah. Anchorage, the largest city, has about 300,000 people.
Wow.
And whenever Alaskans go there, they think it's the big city.
Oh, really?
I used to think so till I came to Seoul. So.
Seoul has 10 million people, so
yeah,
it's a lot more than Anchorage.
That's right, yeah.
That has 300,000 people.
Yes.
Wow, so I just know that the sunset time and sunrise times are very interesting there. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, yeah. So in the summertime, the sun sets. The day is very, very long because you know the sun, wherever the Earth spins, it's almost always in direct sunlight because it's on the you know in the northern hemisphere. So a day in midsummer could be 22 hours long.
What?
Yeah. Now, maybe at 2 o'clock in the morning, it might be dark.
Wow.
But the days are very long. I remember going to bed when it was bright and sunny outside. That wasn't easy for a little boy.
That's unbelievable. So probably we'll have to use the curtains to block the light coming in, right?
Yeah. After a while, Alaskans, if they don't block the curtains, which maybe we did, maybe we didn't, they learn to sleep with the light on. Yeah. Yeah, and so now in the wintertime, of course.
I mean, with the light on that you cannot turn off.
Yeah, that's right.
In the sky.
Yeah. And, and of course in the wintertime you have the opposite. There were times when the sun set at 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Wow.
Yeah, really, really early.
Wow.
And there are times when the sun rose at 10 a.m.
Wow.
So for my sisters and my mother, they didn't care for it especially, but my brothers and I, we were kind of resilient. It didn't bother us too much.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. So you said your dad pretty much told you guys that you guys are going to the bush. So
That's
how
right.
was the bush life?
Well, we moved first to Anchorage, and we lived in a very nice house in Anchorage where my dad had his shop. But you see, about a year after we moved there, or 6 months, I was in the mid '80s, maybe '86. The stock market crashed, and that hit Alaska kind of hard.
Wow.
And my dad lost his job, and we moved to the Matsu Valley, which is north of Anchorage, about 50 miles, or about 70 kilometers.
So he went to Anchorage first, and then he moved after that crisis.
Yeah, and my parents decided to buy an old house for about $70,000.
$70,000.
Yeah, so now that's today that's below dirt cheap. It's cheap.
Yeah,
It's very inexpensive, but
Yeah.
in the mid 1980s it was about normal in Alaska, and so my parents bought this house that was it needed a lot of TLC, and what we mean when we say that is tender loving care, a lot of fixing up. You could see through the holes into the basement below in some places. It was kind of scary, and so we moved there, and we moved from this very nice house to this very old house that had a lot of character and needed a lot of work. My sisters moved to the nice house, from the nice house to the beautiful to the house that we moved to. I think they cried
Because they were so sad to leave
Yeah.
a beat up house.
That's right. Yeah, but in Anchorage, the house we called the beautiful house, the rent was $1,300.
Wow.
Yeah, that was in like 1985.
That's a nicer house, right?
Yeah, yeah, and it was a nice house, a really nice house, but $1,300. That was, my parents asked the people to lower the rent, and they lowered it to $1,100. So,
wow, I think 1,100 at that time is just so much money,
oh yeah,
right?
oh yeah, it was.
That's
a
like
lot of money.
somebody's like paycheck, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Wow.
My dad had a very good job, and he got paid a lot of money, so he could afford it. But after he lost his job, things changed. And a lot of things I remember doing for the first time in my life, trying to hit a baseball, raising plants and things like that. I remember doing in Anchorage.
Wow, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So so the first house that you moved in, was it a suburb area?
It was a suburb area. It was a suburb area, and our address was on 75th Street.
Oh, 75th.
Yeah, I remember that pretty well. And after about 6 months, our relatives moved in with us, and that was interesting.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, there were a lot of people living in that house, and but we ended up moving to the valley, and it was a good thing we moved there.
So suburb to valley,
Yeah.
and then to a nicer house.
Well, we moved to the nice house in the suburb first.
A nice house in the suburb first.
And then from the nice house in the suburb, we moved to the valley.
Valley, okay. And then when was it that you cried? When you guys cried?
Well, we moved to the house in the valley, and that's when my sisters went to camp meeting, went to Pathfinders in Oshkosh,
Yeah.
like 1986.
Uh-huh.
Oshkosh.
Yeah.
And when my sisters were gone, we moved to this old house. My sisters came back, and that's when they cried. Because we weren't living in the beautiful house, we were living in this old house
Ah, I see.
which my parents fixed up to where it became a nice house, and they redid the floors and the walls, and it became a nice place to live.
So who are the previous owners of that fixed up house?
Well, to be honest, I think they were drug dealers, but I don't know
Really?
for certain. They were. Don't remember them very well. We moved there with the understanding that nobody was living there. But when we moved there, there were people living there, and we were thinking, why are these people? This is what my mom and dad were telling me later. That why are these people living here? Well, they were all kind of weird. They had like 10 dogs, and my parents were very happy when they left.
10 dogs.
Yeah. So
That's crazy.
yeah, so they left, and mom and dad were trying to think, what do we do with this place? How do we fix it up? But we fixed it up, and dad was able to open a mechanic shop.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
So he went there as a mechanic first, right?
Yeah.
Initially?
Mm-hmm.
And then did he change his job later on?
No, he continued being a mechanic. So that was like 1986. But around 1966, Dad had gone there for military training because my dad was supposed to have gone to Vietnam as a medic.
Oh.
But a miracle happened because when my dad, in the Vietnam War, the Viet Cong, they'd look for the red star on the white patch, and there's a target. And so a lot of medics died because they have that white that thing there.
So they kill medics first.
Yeah. So, and of course later they realized that was silly and they changed the medics. My dad was supposed to go there, but they had tickets for 1,000 soldiers, but they couldn't find his. So he stayed in Alaska.
Oh.
Which, if he hadn't, I might not be here.
Because he could have been killed.
He could have been killed very easily, yeah.
Wow.
And Kathy, my wife's dad, he had a lot of trauma when he came back from Vietnam.
Wow, I can't even imagine that.
Yeah, from Agent Orange and all kinds of other things. So,
what is that?
Agent Orange is something the Viet Cong sprayed on the U.S. troops, and later on it caused a lot of mental problems, and it caused physical deformities among the children of the soldiers.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So actually, whatever you're talking about Vietnam War just is causing me to ask you about the living condition in Alaska, because in my mind, crazy time change, and the sunset and sundown times are kind of like so extreme, and then you said is very pristine, naturey places. So do they go through any negative impact because of those kind of conditions, or people are used to it and people are actually happier, or how do you see the living condition of Alaska?
Well, I consider it very good.
Okay.
Because the house we lived in, it had modern plumbing, modern water, everything you need. Now, it was an old house, but it had everything that we needed, and it was a house that needed a lot of care, a lot of tender, loving care, But it was a good house, and so we got used to just living there with the darkness in the winter and all the light in the summer. And and we would take our dogs out in the winter, and we would tie ropes to their collars, and we'd get on a sled, and we'd say, "Mush, mush," and the dogs would look behind us and look at us like, "What do you want us to do?" So,
what do you mean by mush?
Oh, mush is what. So, kind of a national sport in Alaska, a national pastime, is dog sledding.
Oh, okay.
And so...
Wow, that sounds exciting.
So one of the things that dog sledders say to their dogs when they're on their sled is, "Mush." And when the dogs hear the word mush, they think, "Oh, time to go."
Oh.
So we would get on our little sleds, tie our dogs to the sled and say, "Mush," and our dogs would just look at us like, "What do you want us to do?" So, and some people, the darkness in the winter caused a bit of depression.
Yeah.
And some people, like kids, were kind of immune to it.
So how early is the sunset time in the winter?
Well, in the wintertime, the sun, for 1 month around December, end of November to the beginning of January, the sun can set at 2 in the afternoon.
Yeah, I think you said at 2
Yeah,
p.m. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and it can rise around 10 p.m. I mean 10 a.m. Excuse me.
So sun rises at 10 a.m. and it sets at 2 p.m.
Yeah.
The sun is up for 4 hours and 20 hours is darkness.
Well, the from 2 p.m. onward, the sun is down. You can see the light behind the mountains, and at 3, the light is pretty much gone. And at 9 a.m., you can see the light behind the mountains, but the sun doesn't actually come over the mountains until 10 a.m.
I mean, can anybody run any businesses for those winter? How long is the winter?
Well, winter could last around, around 8 months.
Do they even 8 months?
In sometimes yes, 7 to 8 months. So
what?
Winter started at the end of August.
Wow.
Maybe.
What?
So you have like September, October, November, December, January, February, March.
So I guess people are used to the darkness, right?
People get used to the darkness. Some people don't truly get used to it. They just stay depressed most of the winter if they don't go south. Now, a lot of senior citizens, they go south for the winter. We call them snowbirds.
8 months of the year.
Yeah. Now it varies. Sometimes you'll get lucky and it will be 7 or 6.5.
Wow.
But once in a while, like there was one winter where the snow wasn't all melted until the end of April.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what do they do during the day in the winter, and what do they do during the night?
People go to their jobs. You know, there's jobs pretty much everywhere. Education and the medical field were the biggest job providers, and of course, oil was a big job provider also.
Oh, I see.
So, and of course, you know, you had shopping malls, stores of all kinds, dentist office, doctor's offices, restaurants, you know. So people would find jobs where they could, and either they learned to drive in the snow or they rode with somebody else.
So I guess the life in Alaska is just pretty much nightlife throughout the whole winter.
In some ways it is, yeah. Alaska, yeah, so people in Alaska will celebrate, I mean, I'm telling you what I remember, but people in Alaska, they will use any reason to celebrate. For example, in Alaska, the Super Bowl is huge. Now, honestly, I could care less about the Super Bowl. I'd rather watch soccer. You know, that's just me. Yeah. You know, because my favorite teams never won anyways. Anyways, so
you pick the wrong team that always loses.
Yeah, and you know, after picking teams for a couple of years, you realize no point in that. But some people will have a big celebration on the Super Bowl. They'll have lots of snacks and lots of food, and people who don't even like football will come just to eat snacks and talk.
Wow.
You know, I remember I didn't care for the Super Bowl much, but I went to the relative's house because they always had lots of snacks. You know, olives and bowls and things like that.
Wow. Know? So what do you miss about Alaska that you're not experiencing anymore because you're not there anymore?
Well, I miss how friendly some people can be. I miss the wilderness, you know, because I mean, when I was a kid, we would leave the house, walk out to the backwoods, you know. But you know, I had my first answer to prayer when I lived in Alaska. That I remember praying for something and God answering my prayers. So we had this dog we called Prince. And he was a very cute dog. He was very smart. You know, we had to keep our dogs on chains because, you know, they would harass the neighbor dogs or harass the neighbors or whatever. One time, Prince got off his chain and ran into the forest.
Wow.
He was my sister's dog. So I ran after him, and as a little boy, I could run without stopping for a long time. Things change.
Not anymore.
Yeah. Although, anyways,
Yeah.
So after a long time, I finally caught him. I thought, I've got you finally, and I had hold of his leash. Then I looked around and I realized I had no idea where I was. And you know, a little boy's imagination can play tricks on him.
Wow.
He could look behind a little hill and wonder, maybe there's a bear behind that hill. Maybe there's a bear behind that hill. What do I do if I run into a bear? So I walked and walked for an hour. I walked and I didn't know where I was. And so I remembered in Sabbath school that, you know, if we ever had a problem, we should pray and ask the Lord for help. So that's what I did.
Wow.
And I said, Lord, I don't know where I am. Please help me. Amen. And so I thought, well, my first thought was, well, I should start walking, but what direction? So I kept walking, and
wow.
you know, and I kind of felt impressed to go in one direction, and I kept going in that direction, and it led me to a road.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. So a nice old man was standing in the road, and I asked him, "Do you know where I am, sir?" So, and he, you know, he had some candies he gave me, and he said, it's all right, you know, you probably don't live very far away from here. What's your number?
What's your number?
I don't know.
The address?
Yeah, and so finally he realized where I lived. He called my mom, and Mom came and picked me and the dog up. So that's the first prayer I remember God answering.
That's amazing. I understand how you can miss wilderness, because I remember being in Arizona desert because I was doing some mission trip in the reservation area in America before I came back to Korea after my campus counselor experience that I had over for about a whole year at the University of Michigan. And when I looked at the desert, I was thinking, wow, this is so cool. There's nothing, and I see once in a while like lizards and different things, and cow poops and horse poops, and wow, everything's so dry and everything is just so quiet, and I was just admiring the beauty of nature, and wow, I think I get that. That quietness, that solemnity is probably lingering in your mind once in a while, right?
Oh, yes. Yes, when I think about going back to Alaska, I think on the one hand, oh, I missed the wilderness, and on the other hand, I think, but remember to be safe. You never want to be near a moose.
Wow. Okay, tell me a little bit about your encounter with animals. How dangerous is it to be in Alaska alone?
Well, one time I was playing on the side of a hill near our house. And I looked around the hill, and there's this big bull moose. I'm like, and I ducked around. I thought, oh, I better stay here. I thought, maybe he will go away. I was getting cold, and I looked back a little while. He's still there.
Wow.
When is this guy going to go away? And he stayed there for like 40 minutes.
Wow.
Eating. Finally, he went away, and I went inside, and I was cold.
Oh.
So we never approached we never approached moose because they're unpredictable.
Really?
Yeah.
What can they do?
Oh, they could kill a person easily.
For no reason?
Well, yeah. If a mother moose thinks that you might be a threat, she'll try to trample whoever it is. She'll try to kick you or stomp you or whatever. They can be dangerous, and people have died because they were not careful.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I'm serious.
You've heard stories?
I've seen it on camera.
You've seen it on camera?
Yeah. Now, I didn't see, it was from a long distance away, but there was this guy outside a bank, and he didn't get in the bank quick enough, and the mother moose killed him. Because, I don't remember the details, but moose can be unpredictable.
Wow.
And they're not the smartest animals in the world.
Is the moose the one that is supposedly pushing the sled for Santa? Is it that one?
Oh, those are reindeer.
Reindeers.
Yeah.
So moose looks a little bit different.
Yeah. Well, a moose a moose can easily be 200 centimeters.
Oh,
easily.
That's so big.
Yeah, they're very, very tall. Like they're about as tall as Shaq, the basketball player. They are huge. They're probably taller than him. So we had a friend who was about 6'5". He was over 200 centimeters. He was tall.
Wow.
He was standing on our porch, which was about that tall. He went out one night, and he was standing on our porch, and he wasn't doing much. He was just looking at something. He looked up. There was a moose right there staring him in the face. And that moose was as tall as him on the porch and as tall as he was.
Wow.
Scared him so bad, poor guy.
Wow.
So they are very large, and they can be very unpredictable.
Wow.
The male mooses, what they do is they will think that a train is a rival suitor. So they'll try to attack trains. Of course, the train always kills them because it's much bigger than they are.
Wow. Seriously?
Yeah. So when my first year of public school when I was 7, one morning it was dark. We were riding to school, and our bus ran into a moose. And I don't know what it did to the bus, but I didn't know it was, there was all this commotion, and I didn't realize what was going on. But after a while, they taught us off the bus onto another bus, and we went our way to school.
Wow.
Later on, I saw the bus driver taking a giant pair of antlers, and he was trying to attach it to the bus.
Wow.
So
Antler? What is that?
Huh?
Antler?
Oh, the antlers are just like the
antler.
horns.
Oh, antler.
Yeah. So the animal.
The horns.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So the animals can be moose and bears are dangerous, but and maybe wolves too. But other kinds of animals, they're not really a threat. And bears, when they hear noisy people coming, they like to go somewhere else.
Ah, so unless you confront them to threaten them, they're gonna leave you alone.
Yeah, because so my parents always told us, my brothers and I, make as much noise as you can. It will scare the bears away.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So making noise for us was easy. So we always made sure to make a lot of noise.
So what is an animal name? Moose?
Yeah.
So moose is a major threat, and bears, you need to make noise.
Yeah.
What other animals have you encountered?
Well, yeah, quite a few actually. When my brother and I were walking out in the woods once, we came to a tree that had a hole in it, and there were 5 baby birds inside. Very tiny little birds, and we raised them, and they were very cute.
Oh.
There was one time when we'd catch frogs. They would always die. And of course we had a lot of chickens, and we had a goat, and we had dogs and cats. So our, and we had a chipmunk that lived behind our house, and we'd leave food out, and then we'd watch for it to come and take the food away.
Wow.
And sometimes we would see owls in the woods.
Wow.
Yeah, so there was quite a lot of wildlife. We saw red foxes on occasion.
Wow.
So there was a lot, and then of course there was a lake not far from our house, and we used to see beavers there.
Wow.
Yeah, so there was quite a lot of wildlife, and there were there were birds that flew over all the time.
Wow.
So.
That's amazing. I heard beavers take a day off once a week. Is that true?
Oh, I've heard that too. I think it must be true.
They don't build dams once a week to
yeah.
rest.
I've heard something like that. Yeah, and they're very sociable, and with each other, and so beavers they have several holes. They'll have several, their entrance is under the water, and they'll have several little rooms.
Yeah.
And they'll all sleep in their different rooms, and in the fall they bring as much wood into the water as they can. So in the winter, when they're sealed under by the ice, they'll dive down under, and they'll nibble, and they'll gnaw off a branch, take it up and eat it when they get to their home.
Well, sounds like engineers and builders.
Yeah, a beaver's teeth, kind of like your fingernails are always growing, but not your teeth. But a beaver's teeth is always growing.
Oh, so you have to keep biting.
So they have to use their teeth all the time, otherwise, and squirrels are the same way. There was a woman once who got a squirrel, and she loved her squirrel so much that she bought it unshelled peanuts. Well, that's not good for squirrels because they need they have to they use eating nuts with shells on them keeps their teeth at a good level.
I see. Wow. So we've been talking about animals. So what is the relationship or friendship that you remember the most vividly, the good ones?
Mm. You mean animals or?
I mean your human relationship,
Oh.
your friendship or.
Well, I guess that my most vivid relationships are with memories are with my family members.
Okay.
You know, and so I have 5 siblings, of course, and of course, you know, at that time there's one video from 1989 that we have. My parents rented a camera, and so we have this like 2.5-hour video.
Oh, really?
And of all us kids, and so my most vivid friendships were with my siblings, and you know, sometimes when you're a kid, it's like, my goodness, can I get away from these people? Can I get away from these siblings?
Yeah.
But then, of course, later on in life, you're like, my goodness, can't I get together with them?
Yeah.
So, and I made friendships with people from church. They're Facebook friends of mine to this day. And so, yeah, I made a lot of really close friendships. And I still communicate regularly with a lot of people from Alaska. So.
Wow, that sounds great. So you had a really wonderful time with your friends and families, members and neighbors and church people.
Yeah.
Wow. Do you have any last story you would like to share? The ones that you remember the most?
Well, yeah. So my uncle moved up to Alaska not long after we did.
Okay.
And you know, my uncle had kind of a hard life, you know, and he moved up to Alaska when I was young, and you know, he had a stroke in 2008. My uncle did, and it killed him.
Wow.
However, my uncle, he had 2 strokes, one that killed him in 2008 and one he had in 2006. But after the stroke in 2006, he gave his heart to the Lord. And he was, you know, because of, you know, the influence of my family, I think it had a positive impact on him. And sometimes it seems like life is about reaching people with the gospel, even if they're our family or friends or cousins or relatives. And so there are still people that I'm trying to reach, and there have been wonderful times where God has answered prayers for my siblings or my people in Alaska so wonderfully, and I know He's still working with them. So,
wow.
So Alaska is still a mission field, and there are still people there that I'm trying to reach.
You know, ever since my dad passed away, I began to see every relationship as some sort of a countdown, because you never know how many times you can actually meet them in person. Because you have, okay, you may be a good friend to someone for 2 years or 3 years or 1 year or 6 months or 2 months or 3 months, and then after that brief encounter with them, they're out of their life, and then they're back in the corner in your memory, and then it's very difficult to see them again. I mean, you left Korea and you came back and you're leaving again, and I don't know when you're gonna come back.
Well, I'm trying to, because see, on the one hand, I want to do the Lord's will, but I can't mistake certain things as being the Lord's will when they're not.
That's
so
true.
So like, for example, if a husband and wife live one place and they want to do God's will, but one of them doesn't want to leave, then it's a difficulty.
That's very true. That's very true.
Yeah. So right now I enjoy living. I enjoy my job, and I enjoy living where I'm at. And my prayer now is, Lord, is this where you want me to remain? That's what I'm praying right now.
Yeah, I guess my motto is live as the most beautifully as possible with the short amount of time that you have.
Yeah.
So your character that you build up every day with the divine help as a human being may make something beautiful out of it. I don't think anyone's life is perfect, but I think you can try to make it as most beautiful and inspiring as possible.
Yeah.
So it can be an inspiration to others. And then I'm pretty sure your uncle might have been influenced by the ministry of your family that your family did to him, and probably made eternal impact.
Yeah.
So that's exciting.
Yeah, you know, the first stroke could have killed my uncle easily, but it didn't kill him. But it made him realize the time that he had. And his son was my cousin. His son was always telling him, "Dad, you need to give your life to the Lord." Now, my cousin is a great guy, and he spent probably about 7 years in prison because of something, you know. But he became converted in prison, and then he started reaching out to his dad spiritually.
Wow.
So, so it was, you know, his son had an influence, and we had an influence.
Wow, that sounds beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
So how is he?
My cousin?
Yeah.
Well, I don't hear from him much these days. I know he lives up there, but I haven't had a lot of contact with him. He's running a business that is there are a lot of people who don't know how to, like myself, who don't know how to drive in the snow. And they can get stuck on the side of the road, leave their car, and get a ride. So there are all kinds of cars stuck here and there on certain highways because people, you know, they don't have money to get their cars out of the, you know, they don't have money to go back and get their cars, so my cousin will collect them and keep them in storage.
That's a business?
He gets paid for that because
it's a very unique thing to do in Alaska.
Yeah, and so my brother, my oldest brother, and my cousin work together because my cousin owns the business, but my older brother, he can operate a semi-truck.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That sounds fantastic. Redeeming cars that are stuck in the snow.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's right. Awesome. Well, thank you, Brent. It was a very fun story. It was very interesting, and I'll probably call you again.
Okay.
When you're in America a few years later or sometime in the future.
All right, that sounds good.
Thank you so much.
Glad to help.
Thank you.